So welcome to the July, what day is it? 9th? July 9th, 2025 meeting of the Titusville Environmental Commission. I'm glad everybody's here. Let's go ahead and have a roll call, please. Lori?
Chairman Myjack, Vice Chairwoman Thompson,
Here.
Member Burdette,
Here.
Member Tucker,
Here.
Member Walter, Member Delgado,
Here.
Member Browning,
Here.
Alternate Member Young, Alternate Member Cosi.
Here.
Okay, and I guess we have a forum. Good. That's good. Let's have a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, let's move on and have approval of the minutes. Can I hear a motion for approval of the minutes?
I move approval of the minutes.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right. So the motion was made by Member Tucker and seconded by Member Delgado. Does anybody have anything that needs to be changed or added?
I have something I have a question about.
Okay.
On Ms. Gallego, this question I have is on the top of the page, the second paragraph. It starts off with Member Browning explained his work. Talking about Member Burdett's comments, it says, Member Browning stated that this is an example of an urban forestry plan. And then it goes on to say, Member Browning said the city needs an overall community-wide tree canopy project. First of all, what I said, and I think this just needs a little clarification. Member Burdett's comments on his research that there were 4 or 5 different major areas. And what I stated was that those looked like typical areas of work in an urban forest management plan. And that I put that research in the context of a sample urban forest plan, okay? Which is a big difference from stating that those comments are an example of an urban forest plan. You see my question about the difference there? The comments of that research was not an urban forest plan. I was saying that it would be easier to understand where those might fit in if we fit those in an urban forest management plan. So what I did was collect a sample out of the municipal specialist, ISA municipal specialist handbook. And using that sample, I plugged in Member Burdett's comments to sort of give the commission an idea about where those things I thought might fit in. Okay? So it's not this, those comments fit within the context of that urban forest plan. And then I canopy plan, but a project suggests one project, not a community-wide plan. And I would like if the verbiage could be amended very simply to say plan, then I'd be okay with that. Thank you.
And so then would you be okay with changing the word example to the word sample, a sample?
Yes.
Okay. That's 2 easy fixes. Anything else? Anybody else? All right. All those in favor of the minutes, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so the minutes are done. Now, in the minutes, you'll see that there was a request to add the open space ordinance discussion to, in talking with Brad and Lily, they suggested that it would be better to move open space ordinance discussion to the August meeting, because last night at the council meeting, staff was going to give some direction to the planning staff on what they wanted to see in the open space ordinance, and so it'll be better if we have those already in place before we look at it and make our comments. So that is why it's not appearing on the agenda for this week. And then second, so that Kim doesn't have to sit through all of the rest of our conversation, with your guys' permission, would it be okay if we move agenda item 8A to follow petitions and requests? So it would go in front of 7, old business. And I'll need a motion for that, if somebody can, if y'all don't care.
So moved.
All right, second?
Second?
All right, motion was made by Member Browning and seconded by Member Tucker to move agenda item 8A to follow petitions and requests from the public, which we are now going into. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak?
I would, yes.
I stand.
My name is Stan Johnson, and you've heard this too many times, but I'm just going to mention just 2 items, just 2. The first item is something we haven't talked about, but I've sent you information on, is that's Mockingbird Lane. So Mockingbird Lane has got a concrete apron 20 feet wide to a dirt access where my wife and I used to own this property, and we gave and the path that goes to 2 houses that have no other access to anywhere else. That's the driven access where they used to have mailboxes, and they have a mailbox right at the beginning now. So the city did something strange. They said that the people have no access, regardless that it's on city road maps, and regardless of what I say that they've been allowed. I went ahead and converted it from a 2-way access to a 1-way access, only 10 feet wide, which is in violation of city fire code that a minimum is 20 feet wide. And it serves 6 slots. And now the last house has absolutely no access. The stabilized access ends before it reaches the last house. So as if the last house doesn't have any access. And I'm just saying to you, this is unacceptable. Now, the second item, I'm going to say, and I sent you an email on this. And the second item is something that you don't like to hear again, and that is when I'm talking about, and I didn't bring a sign this time. It says spraying people with sewage is not appropriate. And I would like to talk to you as adults. Everybody says that we shouldn't spray people with sewage. I had a conversation recently with Tom Abadi, and I said, well, what do you think? Do you think we should spray people with sewage? And he hesitated, and I said, do you think we should spray people with sewage? And he said, I'll have to check with, and I said it again. He said he will have to check with Kevin Cook. So I'm asking Mr. Abadi, which I believe is an adult, and he says he has to check with Kevin Cook. I talked to Kevin Cook, and he said Tom hasn't talked to him about it. And as a professional engineer, he and I are both professional engineers, civil engineering, and we used to work together, and I left in 2008 from the city. So Kevin has to say to me that it's not the right thing to do, but he will not say it in public. And he and I have discussed it repeatedly. Why won't he say it in public? because he knows, as a professional engineer, if he says it in public, I have told him, engineers, and he will be disciplined for that. I hope you understand that. So that is why, one of the reasons why it continues today. Before the election, we had 5 council members who said it's okay to leave the fountains turned on. The TEC approached council to turn it off. They didn't do it. I've approached him many times. Laura Lee talked even to city managers. None of these so-called adults would do it. Now we have 4 out of 5 council members say it's okay to do it. The first time we had a response from council members was about 6 months or 8 months after the sewage was flowing in December of 2020. So what I'm saying is that someone emailed Jolynn Nelson as she was running for office, why did you not turn off the fountains? And she gave an answer. So I'm going to stop right there and see if you have any questions of me, because this is what I call something very unacceptable. Any questions? Please ask questions. I'm asking for help.
Ms. Galeo, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe I had heard something about fountains last night in Fountain Left that they're looking into putting an aerator in.
Senior Pond, I think, is the last city-owned fountain that they're trying to put the aerators in for the purpose of circulating the water.
Okay,
It's a better
so
means than a fountain.
that's the only one left.
Yes, of the city-owned ones.
Okay.
There are many, many more not city-owned ones.
Okay. That was all.
And that was what I was going to say, Stan. They approved the cost share grants from the Save Our Indian River Lagoon Fund for a bubbler at the senior center pond. So that's the last one that has a fountain.
Mm-hmm. And understand is that they will not say that it's the wrong thing to do or it's even the right thing to do, because anything they say will admit that what they did for many, many months was wrong. In other words, it'd be admission of guilt that the right thing to do is to turn the fountains off. I hope you guys understand that. In other words, they're not acting as adults. They're acting as unreasonable children. And notice I didn't use the word shyster or anything like that today. Okay. All right. Please think about it. Thank you. It's a bad problem. It's a bad situation.
Anybody else from the audience wish to speak?
Yes. Kay St. Ange, Maryland Avenue. Last night, council approved the proposal of Eocene Environmental Group for an urban forest management plan. Eocene is a national company with 600 employees, 200 certified arborists working in 28 states. Excellent proposal to council. It was in their agenda packet. I don't know how many of you have had the chance to study it, but it's a good read. Yeah, and I'm eager to see and participate in this urban forest management plan for our community. So I'm going to go over a few things that are in the proposal. Per EOC's proposal, this urban forest management plan will use recent data from aerial images identifying key changes to canopy coverage since the 2021 assessment data, to help establish quantifiable goals for the city's urban canopy expansion. As we all know, a lot of development has occurred since 2021. We've lost a lot of canopy, and now it should be measured. We like to measure things, don't we? So now we should receive recognition of what percentage has been lost since then. The plan is to identify areas of interest or priority for strategic planting, provide timelines, strategies, budget, and specify responsible parties for achieving each goal. Performance indicators will measure progress, including the recommendation of an urban tree canopy assessment every 2 years. Residents will have plenty of opportunity for input to the vision of the plan, canopy percentage goals, and priorities for plantings. The role of TEC as a tree board should be established in this urban forest management plan. We will need to make sure that happens. Osceola County's Urban Forest Management Plan, which is excellent, you can look that up online, establishes an Urban Forest Advisory Board. Well, we have one. You are our tree board. We already have one. But what will be your role in this plan? We need to make sure that that's determined. The proposal mentions the possibility of incorporating the 3-3300 rule in the plan's vision statement and utilizing tree equity scores from American Forests that we've talked about at great length to set canopy goals. Staffing to direct the management will be necessary. Typically, from what I've read on the internet, such an urban forest program has an urban forester, an urban forester, or an arborist to supervise a crew needed for management and expansion of the urban forest. I stumbled on that. I'm going to read it again. Typically, such an urban forest program has an urban forester or arborist to supervise a crew needed for management and expansion of the urban forest. Somebody has to be responsible for this plan, for the implementation of this plan. Partnerships with community groups. Perhaps the Garden Club Tree Farm could serve as a staging area for the tree giveaway program. There's just lots of possibilities if we get engaged and have input, which we will have the opportunity for. The completed urban forest management plan will be presented to TEC for their recommendations to City Council sometime according to the schedule on the proposal around December or January. That's not too far from now. The plan's budget may include funds from the current Landscape Trust Fund, which is the mitigation fund for when they remove trees. The mitigation goes into the Landscape Trust Fund. According to Lily, as of April this year, the Landscape Trust Fund had about $208,000 in it, and it continually grows and fluctuates. The resolution for the use of those funds indicates that this is to be used for beautification through landscaping. The management plan budget could also draw upon the Tree City USA requirement that the city document at least $2 per capita annually towards the planting, care, and removal of city trees. Funds from the general budget can be utilized, and grants for tree planting are available. I have a couple more paragraphs. Do you mind? Are we good? Okay. Let's get behind the urban forest management plan and at every opportunity engage in the process to ensure the plan enhances and expands the urban forest tree canopy, including a proactive street tree planting program and an ongoing tree giveaway program. Let's consider a vision and goals for the urban forestry program. A good example of the urban forest management plan is Osceola County. Take a look at that. Also, for some of you that are new on the board, you might look at American Forest Tree Equity Map. You can look that up online, which shows canopy percentages in each of Titusville's neighborhoods so that we can ask the consultant to look at that. They're willing to. Thank you for all of those who participated in the Isaac Campbell Community Center Park tree planting event. This event was quite a success due to the enthusiasm of the children and the volunteers. The tree team is now organizing another tree planting event. We're going to squeeze another one in for this summer. We can only really plant trees in the summer when it's raining a lot. So we're planning for it for August 2nd at 9 o'clock. That's a Saturday at the Blue Hole Park on Cheney. We have approval to plant 40 cypress trees and about 20 live oaks. I hope some of you will be able to participate in this event, and I will be sending you emails about it. But mark your calendars, August 2nd, 9 o'clock. The mayor and the city managers approved it last night. They told me it really isn't a city park, it's a county park. I've already met with the county at the park and talked about the plan. So it looks like 98% is to go forward. So August 2nd at 9 o'clock at Blue Hole. It's just a half-acre park. And part of it has a lot of trees, but it needs a lot more on the other side. So thank you very much.
Anybody else want to speak for petitions and requests? No? Okay. Well, Ms. Gibbs, you are up, and I'm really looking forward to seeing your presentation. Thank you so much for putting it together for us and for all you out there in TV land. And it'll be on tape so people can go back and look at it. Is that right? Are our televised meetings on tape or?
Super.
Huh? They are? Cool. Okay.
All right. Well,
Thank you.
good evening, Chairman Thompson and members of the board. I am so happy to be here. I'm Kim Gibbs. I live in Brevard County. I live on Merritt Island. And I created this and Michael came to see it when I presented at the Native Plant Society meeting. And so that's why he was familiar with it. And then at the last meeting, he asked if I would present it here for you. The agenda says on trees that survived the hurricane. That is mostly partly true. The title of this presentation is Stormscaping in Central Florida is focused on trees, but there's a big section where I'm highlighting some of my favorite shrubs as well. If the presentation goes a bit long or you need to cut it off, just give me the sign and I'll wrap it up. Okay, so just a little bit of background. My contact information is on this slide. This presentation is available for anyone who would like to have a copy of it. There are a few slides that are reference material. That is a crumpled up pool enclosure that just happens to be in my parents' home over in Dade City in Pasco County. And so the reason the focus of this presentation is really on Central Florida, how from Brevard County over to Pasco County weathered the storm in terms of the plants, because I happen to spend a lot of time over in Pasco County, 90 miles due west of here. And so that was my view of the world following Hurricane Milton. Okay. Unfortunately, a lot of the plants, the trees especially, are common. So we have common plant communities between here and there. Okay, so thinking back to last year, remember Hurricane Helene came through Central Florida, through the Gulf Coast area on about September 26th, 27th, really heavily impacted the Big Bend area. It was less forceful here. Less than 2 weeks later, Hurricane Milton came through on about October 9th and was really an unprecedented storm over in Pasco County, even far inland where Dade City is, about 50 miles inland. And so I happened to be there at that time. It gave me a very good view of how the trees especially performed under really intense storm conditions. Path of Hurricane Milton, a lot of wind. In Dade City, we had sustained winds of about 100 miles an hour, very high winds, and also an enormous amount of water, of rain. And in fact, Pasco County endured flooding for many, many months after the storm. And those two things and significant damage in that region. So this led me to ask, how can we protect our homes and properties from extreme weather events? And highlight 5 principles here. When in our home landscapes, we're going to choose those wind-resistant trees and shrubs for areas located near structures. Put that right plant in the right place. Plant trees in groupings. It makes them stronger. Their roots lock together. Create layers and groups of plantings. They are stronger than specimen plantings. And then we're going to take proper care, especially of those big trees such as our live oaks. So first of all, choosing our native wind-resistant trees. What's a native plant? Just a quick reminder that our native plants are those plants that were here prior to the Europeans coming over and prior to that did not evolve here. Just a note that our authentic Florida landscapes are environmentally friendly and they support our native wildlife, unlike the non-native introduced plants. So this is a reference slide, and it just highlights some of my favorite trees that are common here in this area. And I'm going to go through a few of them in alphabetical order based on the common here in Brevard County and throughout the state. We have many of these on our property, turned out to be not particularly wind resistant, especially when planted as a specimen. So for our red maples that are so well suited for the wet, moist areas, they will fare much better if they're planted in groupings. Very high value to wildlife and to our ecosystems. I love watching the squirrels in the springtime just rake off branches or the leaves, the new growth, and eat them. And of course, they make their nests there. I just find it very entertaining. The gumbo limbo, such a beautiful tree here in Brevard County, extremely wind resistant, also very architectural. There's some good specimens in our coastal hammocks. This one is taking at the Field Manor House on Merritt Island, and there are good specimens over at the Maritime Hammock in Cocoa Beach. One of my favorite trees because it is such a dense tree where that I looked as I was out walking through the neighborhoods and surveying the damage. The southern magnolia stood out as the tree that survived with minimal damage. You can see here on the left, there's a magnolia that's part of the existing forest canopy, and on the right, a magnolia that received no damage, even though the pool enclosure right behind it was completely demolished. And that's the same pool enclosure that we saw on the first slide. Here's another example, walking through Dade City, 2 specimen southern magnolias planted in the front yard, and even though they're specimens, they were not damaged at all. Notice these are limbed up. An alternative way of planting is to allow the branches all the way down to the bottom and to plant around the apron with our wonderful saw palmetto. Slash pines are very common here in our pine flatwoods, oftentimes in association. Notice kind of a mixed results. In this neighborhood, which is all slash pine, and you notice it's not a forest, many of the other oaks and things have been removed. They still performed very, very well. But I did see some damage in other locations. The sand live oak, this is an excellent tree for windy, dry, sandy soils, and it's smaller than the regular live oak. So this is a very good choice for home landscaping. Okay, our big live oak is a major supporter of many different kinds of wildlife. I did not see an informal shrub that the birds will be flitting about in all winter long. It deserves more planting in our landscapes. Very damaged in the storms, but you just cut off the branches and they're fine. The American beauty bear point out that when you see this plant out in nature, it's spindly, it's untidy, and you would think, I don't think I want that in my yard. But in reality, when you bring this into your yard and give it a little care, they're very nice and tidy shrubs that will bring birds into your yard. The fiddlewood with the Atala butterfly there, this picture was taken over at the Maritime Hammock. And the firebush, which is a wonderful shrub to have here. It's a good nectar shrub for the zebra longwings and the Gulf fritillary butterflies. Last year, we finally saw a lot of those butterflies in our own property, and this year there's twice as many. So they really enjoy the firebush, and if you plant them, there will just be whole flocks of these butterflies. The wax myrtle, probably one of my, and the painted buntings really enjoy hanging out in the wax myrtles. It took a few years for us to entice the painted buntings into our yard, but now they are many there in the wintertime. Yeah, so it's a highly regenerative shrub, and they're surviving well after the storm. Myrcene, great for narrow, lateral, constricted areas. And this is just a tall, narrow shrub. Our shiny leaf wild coffee, everyone needs shiny wild coffee to go with the beautyberry. And even after the storm, it wasn't affected at all. And here's our velvet leaf coffee. This is a composition of the saw palmetto with the firebush, and this is from the Maritime Hammock over in Cocoa Beach. Saw palmetto the day after Hurricane Milton, unfazed. Shrubs and trees don't require any supplemental irrigation. Oh, that's the philodendron demolished. Okay, so that's the end of the shrubs, and I have maybe just a few slides left to kind of focus on, emphasize a couple of key points. It's essential to put the right plant in the right place. This photo shows the house on the left, the live oak, which has been pruned quite a bit, but is planted maybe, so it's not the ideal location. Especially when planting trees, we want to emphasize the importance of planting the trees in the right place for their mature size. Strive for 5. We want to plant our trees in groups, striving for 5 in a group. The trees will be stronger, and kind of their roots will knit together and create just a stronger group than a specimen planting. Creating layers and groups of trees and shrubs around the property, including the perimeter and around the foundation. Proper pruning and care, especially of our live oaks and specimen oak trees, having them pruned by a qualified arborist is really important. This tree has been lion-tailed and been badly pruned. Healthy cabbage palm with a full crown. Oh, this is the way they should be. The palm tree should not be hurricane pruned. This is very harmful to the tree, and more education is needed in this area. Yeah, we don't want to plant our trees under the power lines. This ends up happening where the utility company comes through and just kind of whacks everything down. Okay, oh, and that's it. That was our little tour through stormscaping and hurricane-resistant trees and some of my favorite shrubs. So thank you all for listening, and I'm available if you have any questions. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate that really beautiful presentation, Kim, and we appreciate all the trips that you have made to come up here and help us with our native plant lists. And I know that we can depend on you, and we really, really appreciate you. We really do. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you all as well.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbs.
Okay, moving on. Old business. Old business, the Native Municipal Tree Canopy and Landscape Management Trust Fund. We can have some discussion if y'all want to.
Chairman, I'll start off if I may. Okay. First of all, this may be going a little slower than you all anticipated. I'm not sure. When we left the last meeting, Chairman Majak had suggested that maybe we ought to break this up into chunks and eat the elephant one chunk at a time. Those are my words, but I think what his words were to let's break this up into pieces and try to maybe divide it up into pieces so that different, members could tackle it, which I thought was a good idea. I think we're yet to sort of figure out what those pieces are exactly. I know one of the things I've been focused on is the pieces being, and the major pieces being large canopy trees, that they're most important. Ms. Tucker's notes, and I kind of got the impression that maybe what I'd been writing about initially was too much of a focus on large canopy trees. I didn't mean to suggest or insinuate that we didn't need to do native shrubs or native ground covers with native trees. But in terms of what we spend our money on, I think I made the comment that if we have money and we have an urban forest program in place, it makes sense to me to spend money on the most important workhorses of the native plants, and that's the large canopy trees. That's not to say that work with other native plants isn't being done. It's just that it's hard to mitigate heat islands with shrubs. You might get some, but if you recognize that a lot of the work that canopy shade trees does is minimizing energy consumption in buildings, which is a huge energy suck, if you will. And trees can, throughout the year, can knock down energy consumption by 30% or more. Just depends on where those trees are located. So I need some, since the last meeting, and being proactive in breaking this down, but Michael Majak sort of started off talking about, breaking it down into, he broke it down into as far as, large trees to mycelium, and talking about the organic properties of soils. And there's different ways to, the plant hierarchy, and you can go large, medium, and small, that kind of thing. But also, perhaps we ought to be, one piece of this, if you're breaking it into pieces, might need to be soils. Are soils important? For sure. One example of importance of soils is that a canopy shade tree's roots are mostly on top of the ground, and one of the most critical and common source of a tree's death on construction sites is allowing heavy equipment into a tree protection zone, and they crush roots, and that kills trees. If the roots are not connected to the transport, if the feeder roots are not connected to the transport roots that are connected to the structural roots, then the trees are not going to be able to take up water and survive for very long. So you don't fill over those roots because those roots need the oxygen that they've been living and growing on for decades. And you take a large tree and you put 6 inches of soil over the roots or cut away 6 inches of soil. You're either starving the roots of oxygen or you're removing the roots. So either way, we need to leave those soils alone. Do they need to be enhanced? Probably not. I think the best thing you can do almost, I had a landscape architect boss one time that told me, if you don't have a big budget, the best thing you can do is put the right tree in the right place and just vegetate the ground plane. Right tree, right place, and if it's not grass, it's native grasses or whatever you have that's native that you want to fill in the ground plane with. And you do need to vegetate the ground plane to deal with erosion of sandy soils, right? Since the last meeting has been to sort of flush out the basis for this this landscape management plan being focused on large trees. I'd like to ask a question of the commission. Or so far, do we seem to be heading in the right direction? Can I get some feedback on that? I tend to talk a lot about trees sometimes because I was a certified arborist, and I like trees and I understand how they work in the environment typically, but they're not everything. And there may be some members that feel like they would like to, there's a piece of this landscape management plan or trust fund that they would like to focus on.
6:21 p.m.
By focusing on, I mean establishing a basis for why we need to, say, devote funds to, let's say, we were to preserve or devote 20% of the funds to a certain portion of the landscape, shrubs and ground covers. I'm not in favor of taking down trees and getting recompense for that, and then buying a lot of flowers and doing a lot of flower beds at the entrance to the city. Even though I think that's important, I don't think it's a good trade-off for the city to be taking the money from developers who cut down trees and to take it and devote it to flowers. So maybe a certain portion of the trust fund could be devoted to gateway enhancement. Flowers need, unless you're doing all perennials, from what I've seen so far, there's a certain amount of flowers that are being planted that are not perennials, and maybe they need to be regenerated next year. And so a certain portion of your landscape trust fund would go to beautification at the city's entrances. Any thoughts on, from anybody else about breaking this up so that, each member could focus on one piece of it? I'm not sure what Michael was thinking when he said break it up, but I would have preferred that if we could have sort of taken a section last meeting and broken it up then, and on all of us to come back today and sort of contribute some notes to it. I appreciate Beth Ann, her notes on this, and LID, maybe, some of the funds that we get from developers need to be apportioned to the city's contribution towards LID work. It could be a model LID project in a city park. Something like that, that ends up being a partnership with a developer on a model project. I don't know, but I'll stop there and sort of open the floor, hopefully, and there'll be some other comments about how we eat the elephant one chunk at a time. But let me say this. I think at some point, and when is that point, we need to wrap this up and give a recommendation to City Council. And at that time, what is it we're going to feel comfortable with? What do we want the Landscape Trust Fund, right now, since 2001, it's been basically devoted to planting public spaces. Beautification is what the 2001 ordinance talked about. It actually used the word beautification, so you can interpret, that's a pretty broad term. You could say flowers, or you could say, well, it's a beautiful live oak. All of that's beautification. So it's pretty broad. Your thoughts? I'd appreciate hearing anything you have to say about breaking this trust fund thing up, because at some point we've got to recommend to council, more specifically, I think, taking it from just beautification and really how much of that money needs to be devoted to the urban forest plan or gateway landscaping, or what else do we think it should be devoted to, which hopefully does more environmental work rather than less.
Thank you, Mr. Browning. Does anybody have any comments before I start? I don't see any lights. Okay, I have struggled with this ever since it's been proposed, because I feel like, I'm an old boat captain, and I feel like I'm in a rudderless ship that's just yawing around while the clock ticks and trees get bulldozed in town, and we're losing trees, and I just don't see any direction on this, and I really don't see a need for it in the beginning. And I'm frustrated because we have spent a lot of time talking about it while we're fiddling while Rome is burning, I feel like. And we can always come back to this. But, we've got beautiful copies now of the Sustainability Action Plan and the Natural Resources Plan. So we worked on those, and they're done, and so we have a plan. I think we should be trying to work on use our Natural Resources Plan that the council approved, and try to, there was some things that were pointed out in the Natural Resources Plan, like that are desperately needed, like a penalty for a homeowner that cuts down a big, huge oak tree, without a permit, or we need a legitimate way to chastise, people that are just cutting down trees. We need a registry for arborists in the area, so that if a developer does need an arborist, they can go to our register and pick an arborist. But I feel like, we're talking about this. We don't have any direction on where we're going with it. We should be, instead of talking about this, we should be talking about how to save our tree canopy in town. And I don't think that this save trees. We should be working on ordinances and methods to save trees. And like you can see what happened in New Mexico, where they had a flood, like the flood in Texas, it took out a lot of trees. It just flat out did. But the one in New Mexico, the reason that so much damage occurred there is because they had wildfires that had burned up all their trees. And so the trees weren't there to soak up the rainwater, and function like trees do. Therefore, they had massive flooding. Those are the kind of, that's just my opinion. I think that we can work on this thing, but I don't think we should spend a lot of time on it, because we have a lot of other important things that we should be focusing on right now, that would be better for the trees in town. I have this, we have a very developer-friendly council, and they're going to be reluctant to put any additional burdens on the developers And I still haven't figured out whether this is gonna replace the existing, tree funding mechanism that we have now, or is it gonna be in addition to it? I still don't have a vision for what this is supposed to do. And that
Okay, so, I'm not the tree guy, so, but I don't think we have a goal, period, end of sentence. Whether it be short trees, little big bush, little bush, doesn't matter. We don't have a goal. We have ideas, but we don't have a goal. We don't know what to do with this money. We want to do a lot of things. We want to talk a lot, we have talked a lot about it, but we don't have a goal. And the goal is not a one-word thing. Okay? It's got to be very broad. And the one thing that I would hesitate to include is the word beautification. Okay? This is not about beautification. This is about vegetation. And this is where I think we should, with all the realms that Laura Lee just presented, because there is a thing about how do we control it administratively? How do we control it budgetary? How do we control it in terms of people's rights to do what they want to do in their land? And so we got to take all those, but we have to go up with a goal and decrease by 10%, 20%, I don't know, pick a number. And then let everything come in. What do you need to do that? Because right now, we're going to have a contractor come in. But if they don't know that we approve 4,000 units south of the city, not south of the city, but within the city limits, but on the south side, that canopy is going to come. And they're going to give you a big, beautiful picture of Titusville. But there's no connection, no integration between what we say here and what zoning is approving and what council is approving. There is no connection whatsoever. And so we can come up with a big tree program, okay, or native plants program, but those are standalones, and we need to come to a comprehensive for Titusville. What is the goal that we're trying to do here? Because we got realities to deal with. Those 4,000 units are going to be built. And you know what? A lot of trees are going to be gone, no matter what we do. And so, so therefore, now we're going to hire a contractor to give us a great aerial picture with a bunch of drones of trees that are not going to be there. So again, my point is where, and Mike and I have talked about this. It's all about what is the goal, and this is why we're meandering from the different things, like Laura Lee was saying. So, to me, what I propose is that we spend some time on what is the goal that we're trying to do.
Don't you think there's numerous goals?
There are numerous goals.
The Urban Forest Management Plan is going to hopefully define a list of goals that are underneath the grand vision.
So we're going to let a contractor define what those goals are, right?
I think we need to support the
Okay.
tree ordinance, and staff need, when I say we, I'm talking about Environmental Commission, but staff and the community at large, tree team,
Right.
Titusville, everybody needs to support the ordinance that we have and keep working to make it better.
And that's fine. That,
So the trust fund, maybe what we need to do is take a couple of steps back and just keep it a very simple 1 or 2 page document and say to council, this is what we think the trust fund money needs to be mostly devoted to. That's one idea,
Yes,
and that's it.
and that could be 3 or 4 areas, and then we're done. And within that area, we stuff whatever we need to stuff for those areas. But if we don't do that, we're gonna be given goals from a contractor that doesn't live here.
Well, we're on the trust fund right now. We're talking about the
No,
trust fund.
I know,
So,
but all of those things are playing. These are rotating circles that are all moving around, okay? And so my point is that we should come up with the goal. And if we can
for
get
the
it,
trust fund,
for the trust fund,
right.
what is the trust fund gonna pay? What is the trust fund gonna do? What are you gonna get out, council, this is what you get for your money. In very plain English. Council, this is what you get for your money. City, this is what you get for the money that is being paid into that fund.
It's going to have the most value for the dollars that we have.
Exactly. Okay, and what do we need help? In what areas do we need help? Do we need help in integrating zoning? Do we need help in code management? You know, who do we need to bring in to make, we can say, hey, we're gonna plant 100 trees, all big, in the city and use the money for that. Okay? I'm not so sure that's what we're looking for, because we need to provide a system.
Hey, I'm a plan the work the plan kind of guy.
Okay, so,
And I think the plan that's coming down the pike is the urban forest management plan and the grand vision, all the goals that come under that. And that's gonna lead, hopefully, to council deciding where's the best place to put the money. But right now, getting this landscape trust fund business out of our hands and getting it to council, I'd like to do that in the next couple of meetings, if possible. And the only way I see to do that is to simplify all this stuff we've been writing about.
Yep.
And condense it down into a 1 or 2 page document and not worry about all the mycelium and everything else at the moment. Not that we're not concerned about that, but we need to move on to other things and give the broad recommendation to council and let the staff that we have run with it, to the council that we have, and let them run with it, and us help reinforce Tree Team Titusville in trying to get the ordinance where it needs to be, because it's still not there. It's a work in progress, as most ordinances. This is the case of tree ordinances all over the country. They evolve over time, and hopefully, it was the way when I worked for the City of Atlanta Planning Department, that was the way it was there. It evolved over time. It's a work in progress, and it's not a snapshot. It takes a lot of work to develop the tree ordinance initially. And one of the best things we could do is support what we have and keep trying to make that better.
so going on your thought, if we could come up with some areas to concentrate the focus of the future developments, the future trees, the future studies, and go to council and say, those are the areas that we should look at, including, obviously, regulations and all of that goes with it, because we do have ordinance that we have to deal with, and that's part of it. We have zoning that we have to deal with.
Sure.
If we don't integrate all those things, and maybe 5 or 6 areas that we can bounce around and say, this is the areas that we want to concentrate. And go to council and say, this is what we need to do. And again, I'm all for leaving the word beautification out of it. Because they approved the entrance.
Years ago.
No, it
But
was
yeah.
04,
Yeah.
07 in that
It
neighborhood?
it was a long time ago.
Okay,
But
and
let's let
2001.
Member Burdette talk. He's had his light on for a long time.
So anyway, I yield.
So my thought was just, as far as goals, I'd say one of the most important things that we could definitely do is have the full-time urban forester, really, because, we can come up with plenty of goals ourselves, but they're really going to be one of the people who implements a lot of things and possibly things that we haven't even thought of. They're going to know, hopefully, right tree, right place, and a lot of these things that we can write about, but we might not be able to go out and actually do ourselves. So I think the urban forester is probably one of the first pieces of the puzzle.
Thank you. Member Tucker?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't this all started because we were asked to give input on an urban forestry program? Is that right or wrong? Is that what started all this discussion?
Do you mean the native municipal tree canopy, like line item?
Input on establishing an urban forest program for this city.
It is in
Which
your,
includes the Landscape Trust Fund.
yes, it's in your plan and in the
Okay.
natural resources plan.
So that explains why we're talking about it, but I agree, we can get bogged down in the minutia. So I'm just saying, we're doing what we were asked to do, but let's keep it simple, I guess, and give them what they want.
Well, I don't even remember being asked for input because that's right. We were asked for input on an urban forestry plan, and Ms. St. Ange came up with a really good plan that we all approved, and it would have been free, but then when the city council talked about it, they said, no, we want to pay a consultant. So they wouldn't even look at Kay's plan. And so they said, no, we were going to hire a consultant. So then the lady that was here before you went out and she was the one that got the grant, right? So she got the urban forestry grant. So we got the money to hire a consultant. But in the meantime, this was just like thrown at us by Member Myjack, and we didn't ask for it. And so, we have spent a lot of time talking about it. In my opinion, the remnants and all the history of the money collecting entity that we have in place right now and work on that. I think we should take what we have, and we've got there's a lot of good stuff that's happening, but Member Burdette is right. We need an urban forester. We have 2 people that have certifications that are on the planning staff that are buried with all of their own work with the consultant. But I just feel like we have spent a lot of time talking about this, but we should be taking a look at the thing that's there now, and if staff can find all the documentation of all of the by the city council, I think we'd be better off to come up with a strong reasons for why the money that is being paid by developers for cutting trees down should not be spent on planting flowers out by I-95. I agree with you that it should focus on a large canopy trees, and it should be used, it's money that's being paid for cutting trees down, and it should be used for planting trees. And that's what I think we should do, is attack the existing mechanism that is in place now and fine tune that and, do what we can do with that rather than trying to create a whole new thing that it has grown and blossomed and, I appreciate all the work that everybody has put into it. I really do, but we're not going anywhere. That's what I think we should do.
Question. So, we have the comp plan that mentions trees in more than one section of the comp plan. It talks about trees. We have a sustainability action plan. We have a natural resources action plan, if you will. What else do we have, Lily, that talks about trees? Well, we have and tree ordinance, of course.
The land development regulations and things like that, yeah.
So I have a question. This is the question I have. If it was possible to reference or cite, this section or that section in the comp plan and the natural resources and the sustainability action plan, where in those documents it references the important differences in a one-page document, one page, maybe two, but no more than, some people don't like to read a lot of stuff. We got a lot of things going on these days, but this is good work. This is a lot of work, and it already talks about how important large trees are. So why can't I what's already been done and make a concise recommendation to council to use the trust fund for this? Yeah. For what we see are the workhorses of the natural environment. And that doesn't mean that the urban forester won't decide to use native shrubs and ground covers in certain areas where landscaping is being done with, whether it's connected to an LID project or not. It could just be, native trees being planted along a roadway that need some native vegetation below to control erosion. But I could craft a one-page document that focuses on the trust fund and what the TEC would like to have it focused on. Is it allowable for me to take that draft of a document, a one-page recommendation to council, that could I share it with the other members of the TEC before our next meeting and have them, or how would that process best work, Lily?
Well, I don't know. I was going to mention this under reports, but at the last city council meeting, it was asked that someone does come up and speak, sorry, let me find my notes. That I asked TEC to recommend a speaker to follow the presentation on trees on the July 22nd meeting that Brad's going to give. Is that what you're talking about? You want to talk to them then? To have a tree conversation?
I wasn't talking about trying to get it on that agenda.
That's the next council meeting. It's it July 22nd? Yeah. Oh, you just want to bring that up in general? Yeah. I mean, I could try and put it on
I'm not concerned about the timing of submitting it as much as I am getting it done and off our plate.
So, Lily, would it be, I hate to ask, would staff be able to find the existing language of I don't even know what it's called anymore. Resolution 30-2001. Thank you. Resolution 30-2001.
Yeah, I can send it to you now, that one.
Okay, well, I don't think we want to see it right now because we have a lot of other stuff to talk about tonight.
Or
But if it could be sent out to us, if you can email it out to us, then we can look at it and then bring our ideas to the next meeting. and try
I've
to,
looked at it multiple times over the last week, and I can tell you, but all it does basically is authorize the city to spend that money on beautification of public lands. That's pretty much it. And then recently, this year, solution talked about, well, we're going to take 50,000 out of what's left, which was 65 grand or something, out of that original landscape fund, and put that towards the urban forest grant. And then the 15 that was left over after that would go into the larger landscape management trust fund. Is that? So what? Okay, yeah. Explain the 65,000 that was remaining in the fund from 2001.
Okay, you've got it a little confused. It was a different fund. There was a program, I believe it was called the Landscape Enhancement Program. It has nothing to do with this Landscape Trust Fund, okay? And it was sunsetting. This program was over and done with. It had its time frame, met its time frame. And there was money left in this fund, in this Landscape Enhancement Fund. It was an old thing. And there was like $65,000 in this. And the city decided to use 50,000 of that to match the grant for an urban forestry program. And there was 15,000 left over that they generously gave to the Landscape Trust Fund to augment the mitigation funds for Resolution 30-2001, which indicates, and I paraphrase, the city desires to beautify public properties by landscaping, and these funds received as a result of tree mitigation are to be used to beautify publicly owned or maintained properties. That's what the Landscape Trust Fund that we currently have, the mitigation fund, the resolution, basically that's what it says. But it was 65,000 from a landscape enhancement program. I don't know the details of that program because it was old and it's sunset. I don't know how to find it. Maybe Lily knows more about it, but then 15,000 went into this landscape trust fund that now has 208,000 or something like that. Or in April, it continues to grow because the trees keep getting cut down, as Hector said. You're having a very interesting discussion, and I do have put in a card, and I'd like to add to the discussion if possible, but I'm just answering your question right now.
that sounds good. I was going to ask Lori if anybody had filled out a card on this. Now, this is 7A. This is not the multifamily. This is the native municipal tree fund. All right.
I get to come back up. I'm trying to follow protocol. I'm not very good at protocol. Really, a very good discussion, and you're hitting on a lot of different, kind of bouncing around on a lot of different things. But to answer your question, the city's land development regulations pertaining to the TEC says it is your responsibility to be the tree board, and you are to develop and administer a urban forestry program, a community forestry program. Now the city has got a consultant to do it, and I'm tickled pink. My attempt at it was to spur them forward, I knew it wasn't glossy enough, I don't have glossy paper to print on, but it spurred them forward, okay? And they went with the assessment, and they went with the tree canopy, the urban forest management plan. Honestly, I can't even remember the title. I have to look at it every time. Native Municipal Tree Canopy and Landscape Management Trust Fund. And what you guys are saying has been what's going through my mind now for months. The first page I love, but when we get to the second page about assessing mitigation fees, I agree with Laura Lee. I do not think this council has the mindset to assess developers more burdens. No, I don't believe recommending to council to assess new mitigation fees on developers through this Native Municipal Trust Fund is the right approach. I don't think that's the way to go at all. I do not. I do agree with the front page, but I don't think this is a way to come up with funds for the urban forest management plan. The proposal by EOC talks about a budget. If you were to go onto the Osceola County, their urban forest management plan, they have 2 or 3 pages on the budget. That will be worked out, and I think it will probably include some of this landscape trust fund, like I said, and the Tree City USA funds, and also the general funds, and then tree grants. Hopefully, well, I don't know that I want to say the trust fund is growing because that means they're cutting down more trees, but they're doing it anyways. And so let's take the money from that and let's put it. I like your idea of considering changing the wording of Resolution 30-2001. But as for this Landscape Management Trust Fund, I don't think it's the right approach. I believe following the process already begun by the city, that is an urban canopy assessment. They got the grant, they got the assessment. And following those recommendations, following the recommendations in the urban forest management plan will bring the best results. That is how many municipalities throughout Florida are trying to enhance their, this development is not just happening in Titusville, it's all throughout the state and throughout many places in the United States. So this is the approach, this is the way forward. What is needed is for our city to go beyond the planning stage, though, and implement the urban forestry management plan to expand the urban forest tree canopy as per EOC's proposal and the UTC assessment. It is not just a plan, it's the implementation of the plan that is critical. We can have all the plans in the world on a bookshelf, but if you don't implement them, they're just a bunch of paper. This plan needs to include a strategic street tree planting program and tree giveaway programs with funding from the current Landscape Trust Fund, Tree City USA allocation, and general funds. And there are grants for tree planting. So the proposal by EOC goes step by step through this. They say a staff member will need to be held responsible parties, they call them. Okay, and it talks about it specifically, and the city will need to find the money for a staff member dedicated to this purpose. Otherwise, the plan is just a bunch of paper worth nothing. We must have staff to implement it. We must have somebody to implement it, and likely a crew to evaluate, plan, prune, and remove the trees that are detrimental and not healthy. This is the way forward for many communities. So, they will have these community engagement meetings. We've seen this before with the tree canopy assessment. We saw it with the natural resources plan. They will ask us what we want. They want the community to develop a vision goal. So this is what we need to start thinking about. How will we respond in this community engagement meetings? What would you like the vision statement to say? What goals to be. The consultant is not going to tell us what the goals should be. They're not going to tell us what the vision statement will be. We must create it. We must sit at home and think about it. What would it say? What will it include? I always have said things like we want to expand our canopy for the benefit of residents, wildlife, the aquifer, and the lagoon. That little phrase to me has a lot of value. Okay, so maybe we could put that in the vision statement along with some broad pictures. So that's something I'm not trying to force it down your throat, but what would you like the goals to be specifically? We know that we're going to hear that the canopy percentage has gone down. We can ask for canopy percentages, or we can ask, or we don't need to focus on canopy percentages either. We can just ask, we can tell them where we would like native trees planted in Titusville. Where would you like native trees planted? Okay, we know they're cutting them down, but if we can strategically plant them to provide the most benefit for residents, wildlife, aquifer, and the lagoon, then we're ahead of the game. You know, we cannot help that huge development, but we do have landscaping laws that they will have to abide by to plant trees up and down the streets and all. So that's good that we have those. If you look at the tree equity scores, we know that certain neighborhoods have less trees than other neighborhoods. Is that something that we want to go by? However, there are certain neighborhoods that people have spoken up and say, we don't have a lot of trees, and that's the way we want it. We don't want to have to worry about the trees falling on our house. We don't want to maintain those trees. The trees that we have currently aren't being maintained. I've heard people stand up and say that. So we have to think about that. It's not just a matter of numbers and put those numbers over on our neighborhoods if they're not inclined to have more trees, and we have to think about that. We have to think about maybe we want trees along the bike trails. Yeah, that would have to involve DOT, but guess what? We can involve DOT. Sure. What about in the medians and on the corridors to make our town more beautiful? That involves FDOT, but that can be done. Yes, we have mutual agreements with FDOT for many things. It doesn't mean that we can't do so for the trees. How about along Barna Avenue? I go up Barna all the time, and it's so barren. There are many places along Barna Avenue that we could have trees planted along the street and make that a beautiful thoroughfare. It's a very, north and south place that people use all the time, and it's so barren and sad looking to me. So how about some pocket parks? More pocket parks where people, to have that 300 where you could just walk to a little park and sit in the shade because your house is sitting under the baking sun. Maybe you could walk to a pocket park, and we have 2 or 3 of those little pocket parks in our town, and more of those would be better. So I would like to see some of those. Those are just the ideas that come to my head. What do you think? What would you like to see happen because of this urban forest management plan? So I look forward to working with you, the TEC, to press forward with a proactive implementation of the urban forest management plan to benefit the residents, wildlife, aquifers in the lagoon. So start thinking, because this is going to be rolling out soon. They got the money, they got the consultant, they got a proposal by the consultant. It's on the agenda for council last night. You can look it up and you can read it online, and it's right there. It's beautiful. I think the Osceola County one is even more beautiful. It has all beautiful pictures of how they have lovely oak trees, but we have those in our town as well. We just need to put the pictures in there, and we can show that our town has gorgeous trees that need to be preserved, and they're cutting them down right and left. So I'm excited about it, far more excited about the little one that I wrote up, but it was my attempt. I never said that I was a consultant. They didn't give me $50,000 for my pieces of paper that I wrote up, but I think it did spur them forward. I think the tree plantings spur them forward. And so my goal by establishing a tree team was to set an example to the city as far as planting trees and to influence the city council and to influence you and the planning department. The planning department and the planning and zoning, we influence the city government and the land development regulations, but we plant trees. We've now planted 200, and we're going to plant 60 more coming up soon. So the city has no excuse not to plant trees. Our little group cannot plant street trees. We cannot deal with the infrastructure underground. You could even call the number and find out where it is. It's just too much for us, but we can plant in parks, forest management plan, and then we have the sustainability plan, the natural resources plan, and yes, you could try amending the resolution 30-2001, and that might be very helpful too. So I'm really excited moving forward, and each of us can have a part in this and speak up, and I'm just real keen on it. Thank you for letting me rattle on.
Thank you. Are there any other cards?
No.
Okay. So after listening to all of that, I think that probably the easiest thing to do is come up with our own version of 30-2001. And just do it. You know, take out the language about beautification, make it stronger about trees, and say, this is where we think our money should be spent. We don't think it should be spent on flowers by I-95 or plastic flowers in baskets hanging from the poles on US 1. We want to plant trees. That's my opinion.
I have a question for Kay. Kay, you were going pretty fast, and some of this went right over my head.
Okay.
Would you clarify what you said about the Landscape Management Trust Fund not being, it sounded to me like you said that would not or should not be a primary source of funding for the urban forest.
No, I think it should be.
You
I
think it
think
should
it
be?
will be. I do.
Okay.
I think that there will, the EOC, the consultant, in his proposal, he says there will be a budget that is formulated with this urban forestry plan. They're going to look at all the possibilities of revenue, I do believe. I think that's their goal, and I've seen that in the Osceola one that I studied as well. And so they will look to see where the resources are, and they will see, and if they don't see, we will bring it to their attention that we have this fund that has over $200,000 in it.
So if the TEC made a recommendation, very short and concise, about the Landscape Management Trust Fund being the major, the source of those funds being placed towards the urban forest management plan, you're in agreement with that?
I'm not so sure I'd say that it'd be the main source, because maybe they're willing to donate a lot from the general fund. We don't know, and also community budget for that. They did plant a few more trees this year, but they're not following the Tree City USA $2 per capita. So all of these resources should, be considered for this urban forest management plan's funding. But yes, indeed, I think that you should include that, but I just wouldn't make it so exclusive, in my opinion. Maybe they're going to donate, $500,000 to plant trees. You could always hope.
Be important in the language of Resolution 30-2001 is that we add language in there that funding can be used to pay the salary for an urban forestry person. Because that is where we're hurt right now, is that there's nothing in that resolution now about using the money on anything other than beautification. All right, so we need to bring this discussion to a close so we can talk about something else. What do you guys want to do with the Native Municipal Tree Canopy and Landscape Management Trust Fund? Do we want to put it on the back burner for a while and concentrate on Resolution 30-2001?
Isn't that one and the same?
No. The Native Municipal Tree Canopy and Landscape Management Trust Fund is this document that Michael started, and then Member Burdette added to it, and you've been working on it, and Member Tucker has worked on it, and this is the ship that is yawing around sideways in the waves right now.
And we talked about simplifying that, condensing it greatly and coming up with a thrust, if you will, creating a focus of that fund and saying this is what we recommend that most of the funds be used for to support the urban forest management plan. And isn't that what we are talking about, taking 30-2001 resolution and creating a document, or the basis for a document, a basis for a resolution, if you will, which says, this is our recommendation. We want to encourage you to use the money in the Native Landscape Management or Trust Fund for this purpose, and that's it. And then we get it off our plate and move on.
Yes.
Did I oversimplify?
But I don't know how you can simplify this. Unless you want to just take elements out of this and.
Yeah, but
and
cut a lot out of it.
Yeah, like 95% of it for right now. But let's come up with a suggestion to council of how we think the developers now for cutting down trees, how we think that money should be used, and how we think, I don't know if we should include a reference to the $2 per capita in our new resolution. I think we should, because that money has been being misused for many, many years now. You know, while we call ourselves a Tree City USA, and that money has been you know, it's been bushwhacked by the Public Works Department and used to trim trees, cut trees down, do everything except plant trees.
That $2 per capita can be for maintenance, right?
Yes.
So cutting down a dead tree is part of that program. And if that's what I can't speak because I'm not, but that's not a separate.
It is separate.
I thought it was a separate fund. Yeah.
Can I stand up for a moment? I got the latest version. Lily gave me
Please.
the latest version. It is two separate funds, and I don't suggest trying to merge them at all together. The resolution 30-2001, she could probably read it for you. I almost have it memorized. It is the mitigation funds from cutting. It tells you what section of the LDRs that the money comes from by mitigation of trees. When they cut down the trees, it specifies, and that's where that money comes from. And now you're considering changing some of the wording, and I think that's a good idea of how to use it, but still for use of planting vegetation, I'm just going to say vegetation, on publicly owned land. I think that's the whole purpose of that fund. Now this fund, I'm going to hold up, this is a community forest budget plan that the Public Works puts forth every year in order to be recertified to be Tree City USA. So this is the $2 per capita, and it tells you exactly, it has an outline of exactly how they use the money. Okay, well, in 2023, they don't care. In 2024, they spent $1,900. Well, that was an improvement, you know, maybe. And it actually tells you how many trees they planted. So 2024, they planted 6. The previous year, 0. The previous year, 8. You know, and it goes back to 2013. And we've been getting this, and the TEC has been looking at this. So this is Tree City USA that says that we're a member of. And because of Tree City USA, the city is supposed to allocate $2 per capita towards the things that are itemized here. Not only tree planting and initial care, tree maintenance, tree removal, tree management, and it talks tree planting, tree pruning, and even volunteer time. And they utilize some equipment for this $2 per capita. They utilize, if you, Lily sent this to me, and it has an appendix on it that tells that they utilize some of the salaries from their employees. And when you take, I used it for 5 hours, and so I'm going to add that on to here. You know, they I forget the word for it right now. But anyways, so this is a totally separate thing. I do not suggest merging them.
And where does the money come for that $2 per capita?
From general funds.
General fund. Okay.
Yes, and they're, this is just an outline of how they would use the $2 per per capita. It's not like there is actually, the mitigation fund is actually, anyways, I don't know how to say the right words because I'm not a financial guru. He probably could say the right words. But it's to be allocated, it's, so Tree City USA, I have their standards right here. And here's how it's worded. I will read it to you. Yes. Standard number 3, city trees provide many benefits. Okay, by providing support at or about the $2 per capita minimum, a community demonstrates its commitment to grow and tend to these valuable tree assets. To meet this standard each year, the community must document at least $2 per capita towards the planting, care, and removal of city trees in the planning effort to make those things happen. So that's what this is. That's the document. It's not like they have a bank account that's for this. Anyways, did that make sense? Was that helpful? I hope so.
Okay, so this is what we're gonna find. What we're gonna find is for the last a lot of years, maybe 15, 20 years, these revenue streams have been used in different ways to provide services under the canopy label, under the tree label, all trying to meet the requirements of Tree City USA. Okay, so this is why we should not mingle these revenue streams, because I'm not so sure that anyone, and I'm gonna go on that limb, the only person that probably knows how all this was done was the last city manager. And he's no longer, what needs to happen is we need to peel this banana, because all these revenue streams are intermingled to support certain things that the city has been supporting, and therefore, but the bulk of the money, $200 and some odd thousand, is real, is there. Okay, and that is where we need to concentrate. We can bring the revenue streams later on, and we can try to understand it in the meantime. And short of auditing the city, I'm afraid that we're gonna be very hard pressed to find out all these revenue streams that in the past have been used under these headings. So yes, I will not be in favor in trying to mix and match the things that we do not understand. We do understand the 200 some odd $1,000. That we understand. That we understand. Okay, and then if we get lucky and with the help of staff and revenue streams might be pouring some money into the budget, we may get to a point where we can look at a bigger picture of how this thing is being funded. But keep the 200,000 out, work on the words of the resolution, okay, improve that, and take that forward. And said, this is how we're planning to use this. There are other revenue streams, and we can bring it to their attention because it's the city budget at the end of the day. And let's see how that's going to be compiled now that we have a new city manager. And that will be my proposal to this commission.
Can I just say one thing? The Urban Forest Management Plan has management in it, and it also has planting in it. So if we just make the resolution say, use this money for the Urban Forest Management Plan, the city might just use it again for management. You know, we need to make sure they use it for planting trees, the planting part of the urban. In regards to the Tree City USA, that community forest thing, community budget that I showed you just a few minutes ago, October 3-4 years ago, I asked Peggy Basaka. I had a private meeting with Peggy Basaka, and I asked her, how do we get to the Public Works to plant more trees using that $2 per capita? And she said, get TEC to tell them, to recommend to council to tell Public Works to plant more trees with that $2 per capita. Okay, well, that's a separate thing than the resolution, but there's no reason why you can't do what Peggy Basaka suggested. If you can get the council on board with that, to tell Public Works, because that's what happened to me last night. I had a problem with lift pump in front of my house. The fence is falling down. I've talked to everybody in Public Works about it, and they won't do a darn thing about it. So I stood up in front of council last night, and the mayor agreed with me, and he told Public Works to fix Miss Kay's fence for her lift pump, and they were out there today. Yeah.
That's not the way it should work. If it takes the mayor to go fix a fence, we got bigger problems, and I'll leave it at that.
There are big problems.
Okay, and so, again, I'll go back to the 200,000, Madam Chair. I think we ought to concentrate on that. I think we ought to come up with a set of goals that how we're gonna meet out of that money. These are the things that we wanna do. Okay, and we go forward with that. And then if we need to propose that with that money, we fund Kevin's people. Said, here is X number of dollars for X number of trees, and these are the locations that we think you ought to start with that and make that a proposal directly to the city, and then let them chew on that. We do propose. We have that latitude. We don't have the zoning board power of rejecting things that are not on the zoning and planning. We don't have that. We send recommendations. So therefore, our recommendations will be based on that budget, and this is how we're gonna plan. This is our goal, to budget this, and this is how we're gonna spend the money. Council, it's up to you. Because that's all we can do, right? Am I wrong?
Yeah, no, that sounds good to me. So as far as this thing,
Yeah.
if we take no action on it, then it just kind of, well, no, there's no money in this yet.
No.
I'm talking about the
Funding that.
yeah,
Yes, yes.
yeah. I mean, we can just take no action on it, and then Mike can bring it back up again when he comes back, but right now, we don't even have a champion for it. No, for the 7A, item 7A, the native municipal tree, that's this thing that you and Member Burdette and Member Tucker and Member Myjack this was, the council did not ask for this. No, nobody asked for this. And so, you know, if we just take no action on it, then we can bring it back anytime we want to. But again, I think I think we would make more progress by trying to strengthen the existing resolution that is the enabling language for what is right now $200,000 and growing because they keep cutting down more trees.
Do we want to produce a draft for the next meeting? And include Michael Myjack in the draft that's sent to all the members for review and comment, so that you all have that. Everybody has it for comment. It's just a draft that's being prepared to clarify and it's the evolution of the 2001 resolution, and we're going to put that forward as our work, even though nobody asked for it, but that's what we think should be done. Okay? That's a lot easier. And a lot more focused, I think, than where we were, and it's a lot, I have no problem working on a draft for the next meeting. So I'll be glad.
That would be great, Member Browning. You know, I mean, you've heard some things that were mentioned tonight, like the one thing that keeps coming back is that we need to hire our own urban forest manager, a qualified person to work with the consultant and, you know, run the program for us. So that, I think that's one of the most important things, that and planting trees. That's it. It's pretty simple. We need a urban forest manager, and we want to use the money that is being given to us by the developers because they're cutting down tons of trees, that we want to use that money to replace trees. Pretty simple. All right, so let's move on to 7B, old business, the multifamily ordinance and definitions. Oh, good, thank you. You are awesome, thank you. Yes, what an improvement.
Was it a setting on the printer? Sorry? Was it a setting on the printer or the document?
She doesn't care. All right, so I know we have cards on this, so why don't we start out with the cards?
I made enough for everyone. Mary Spar.
Mary's Bar Coco. Pardon me? It's getting better. I went to PT today. So, did you, what do they call the computers up there of some, I sent an email and it had, you know, for.
I'm sorry, if
Files.
you downsize the agenda, you'll see a folder that says Mary Spar, and all her items are in that folder.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. Okay. That's what we're going to talk about. So, just to review, if I can have your attention. So, just to review, last time, you know, I had some conclusions that the majority of multifamily projects don't prioritize saving existing trees, and they're not using low-impact development, and the trees are preserving mostly in the buffers. Now, this is really important. We had proposed in the multifamily canopy ordinance that we were going to go with a 25% requirement for canopy area. Now, that was done for a couple reasons. One, because Peggy Busaka chose the 25%, which happened to be based on the county task force recommendation. And she wanted all the residential together at first before we had a council meeting, and one particular council member had quite a bit to say in opposition. Now, this 25%, I'd like you to realize that I did an analysis of, this was basically mostly the single-family subdivisions and how much of the 25% would be taken up in the buffer. And Brookshire would have about 40% if they complied with the ordinance. They would have put 40% in the buffer. Forest Trace would have had 11%. Park Preserve, 17% of that 25%. Okay, I'm talking the percentage of the 25%. So Brookshire almost had half of that requirement satisfied by their buffers. Forest Trace, 11%. Park Preserve, 17%. Riverwalk, which has got a new name, they had a lot of large buffers. So they almost could satisfy the 25% by having 70% of those trees in the buffer. At South Carpenter Estates, 25% of the 25%. And Verona Phase 1, 26%. So a lot of the requirements could be satisfied by using the buffer. So that ratcheted up the percentage of preserved canopy areas, because you want some trees saved that are not in the buffer. So that is just something that I want on the record before this discussion happens on the 20th. Our object here, hopefully, is to get the council to now look favorably on the multi-family canopy ordinance. We don't know what staff is going to say about it, but we know one thing. Staff would like something to change in our recommendation to make it more palatable to council and them too. And I found a problem. The problem is that there's sites that have very little trees that would be called redevelopment sites. And what I'm hoping you'll do is make some sort of motion tonight to say that you would like the percentage of the canopy area percentage that is required for multifamily to be adjusted for redevelopment sites with little or no canopy. And that was, in other words, if they got almost no trees, they don't have to get 25% because they're a redevelopment, and it's just going to make their project impossible money-wise. So that's what I'm hoping that you'll do. Look favorably on an adjustment for redevelopment areas. And in fact, on August 24th, 2021, Peggy had put the suggestion of Dwight Seavers with regard to commercial and industrial in that ordinance. So she was looking favorably on it. Dwight and then Peggy put in the ordinance the words, in order to encourage redevelopment of existing developed commercial or industrial sites that may not have any canopy or very little canopy, the canopy standards set forth may be reduced by 50% of the requirement above. Now, we don't have to reduce their requirement down to 12% canopy. We just want the concept to be known to staff so that they can get the point across that TEC is aware of the redevelopment site problems and wants to give these developers a fair break. Because if you got a full, they'll have a lot more trees that they can save than if you got just a couple. So let's go on. We'll just briefly go through the pictures. The first one is of an apartment complex that was built somewhere around 1969 or 1970. It's De Leon Village. And that's your first picture. Does it look like an old plan? Is that what you got on your computer? Does that look like an old plan? Yes. Okay. Does everybody see it? It's the first file I sent. De Leon Village. It's not the first one, it's the third one. Okay, well, let's go to which one do you have first? We'll discuss the first one. Okay, this is an interesting one. I have two pictures of Christian Court. The first looks a little less complicated than the second one. The first one, it says Christian Court condominiums. If I can just, okay, does it say construction plans? Wait, it says, up at the top, is there a bunch of stuff in very, very small print on the right-hand side? Yes. Okay, this is the original plan they had. Okay. And this is what I think is a multifamily condo project. Well, Kay went by this place and she said there's a couple of trees in the middle of this. Otherwise, it's just barren. There may be a couple on the border. Okay, so this developer wants to put this project there. Now, it's not our job to figure out if he's asking for too many units or not. But whatever the case may be, the only trees that he's got showing in his diagram are planted trees, and they're basically around the edges and around that little circle. That kind of that roundabout circle. So he's got a problem, and that's the main point I want to get across. And then what happened is the next picture, it says Christian Court condominiums and on the right, but then under about 6 lines down in the fine print on the right, it says project scope to construct 72 townhomes. So this to me looks like a single family subdivision. Now if that is that's why we need this terminology. Because, it's kind of shows me that there's really no good reason not to include multifamily, because you can do the same development with condominiums, which is multifamily, and then townhomes, which is supposedly single family. But he asked for some sort of variance, so he's got a little different plan. And what I want you to realize is this guy's got a problem. he has basically no trees, and we need to promote redevelopment of these barren areas that, in this case, I believe may have been illegally cleared, and get something nice in there. And he's not going to be able to do it with 25% canopy, which includes 15% preserved canopy area. He doesn't have 15% preserved canopy. Okay, now what do you have for the second project there? It should be the third file.
Second one is De Leon Village.
Okay, De Leon Village, okay, that's the one. That's the one, you got an old plan that, was originally given to staff in 1969, and they've just marked it up. This is evidently an apartment complex that the trees seem to be all gone, basically. And what they want to do is replace the palm trees and the Ixora, which were the standard 1969 plantings.
So they're not, I was looking at this and I'm thinking, why are they planting all those ugly queen palms? So they're not planting queen palms, they're and replacing them with something?
Evidently, they're replacing them. Replace missing 24 to 30, replace missing Cocos plumosa. So evidently they need replacing. They're, I don't know if they're there or what.
Why couldn't they replace the old queen palms with sable palms?
Okay, you're at, to me, I mean, I think it's a bad plan to do that. 1969, that was a standard landscape. I know, because for 30 years I lived in a house in Merritt Island. What did it have? 3 of these palm trees and some Ixora on the side. What we're not going into is, should this guy get away with this? Personally, I think he can do a little better than that. But we certainly would like an apartment complex which has problems and may not be livable. I don't know. We'd certainly like that to be developed, redeveloped, right? But the guy just doesn't have the 15 requirements. And I mean, I really think it'd be a great idea if, the guy could redevelop that, but not necessarily with more of those queen palms and Ixora. But he does have some places where he could plant them. Maybe he'll choose something a little bit more native, right? So the last file I have, if you go on to the next one, which picture do you have on top? Do you have the one with apartments, or do you have the one with the tree survey for the next one?
Is that Evermore?
Yeah. The tree survey is first? Okay. This was an apartment complex, which I don't think is going anywhere because the property was sold after it got, approved. by the council. They did. In fact, I thought it was great. But they had a tree survey, and you'll see that area that's not the retention pond, it's, just that big area where you can see all the lines which tell the elevation. That is completely barren. This is on Park and Harrison. That part where the apartments were going to go is completely barren. But by the existing stormwater pond, he has some trees. But it's not enough. It is no 15%. And he would need a break too. And you'll see, as you go on to the next file, that he really had an excellent project that the council loved. I think everybody in the room thought, wow, nice job. And you'll see that he had a lot of planted trees there. He was going to he doesn't have the reserve trees, so he would need a break as well. And these are the 3 examples of projects that would need an adjustment in the preserved canopy percentage in that requirement. And that's what I'm hoping that TEC will let staff know, and staff will note that in their presentation, that we want to do the right thing and improve the ordinance when we see a problem. And we want the multifamily canopy ordinance to include this provision. It's not quite done yet, but we're trying. So that's what I hope you'll. Any questions?
I'm sorry, I have a lot of questions.
Sure.
So are we gonna do this by exception?
Yes. It would be, okay, what it would be is a provision in the ordinance, and there are provisions in other ordinances that I would suggest that, you not get into the weeds and try to come up with, definitely put a percentage of, that if your site has less than, let's say 5% canopy, that site is eligible for a reduction in the preserved canopy requirements. And it would need to be carefully worded, and the thing, and because you don't want to make a mistake. Asking you to come up with some wording is, you need time to consider it, and to top it off, we need staff's opinion. Staff needs to work on this wording. They're going to be able to do it much better than an advisory board on the spur of the moment, because it's complicated to get the wording exactly right. Dwight Seavers had some wording that Peggy put in, in order to encourage redevelopment of existing developed commercial or industrial sites that may not have any canopy or very little canopy. Any canopy or very little canopy is a general statement. Staff may or may not want to know a little more specific. And then it says, this is Dwight, the canopy standard set forth may be reduced by 50% of the requirement above. That 50% of the requirement above was 50% of the 25%. Because in this version that went before council on August 24th, 2021, all residential had that 25% requirement. And everybody knew at the time that those buffers could satisfy part of it. So you have any other question?
I don't know how to get around that, because
Get around what?
the exception.
Oh, I think we should have it.
No, I know, but I guess what I'm struggling is, so you don't meet the 25%, okay? You don't meet the 25%, which is what you're saying. So my piece of property, I'm gonna come in and go, okay, so let me see what's the least that I'm gonna be allowed. I'm gonna game the ordinance, since you already took away the requirement. You took away the requirement because my property doesn't meet it. Okay, so I'm gonna come in and try to game it so that I put as few trees as I can until you say, well, that's okay.
Oh, you got to get okay.
You see where I'm going?
Okay, first of all, the way the ordinance reads is, this isn't the redeveloped thing, and you may want to the staff may want to put on how long this redevelopment parcel is sat there empty, because you don't want somebody just. But I know what you're saying. So what I want to say is what the ordinance says is if you do not have the 15% canopy, on the site. If you don't have that, you have to make it up with all planted trees. In other words, you would have to get the 25% planted trees. And that's a little bit impossible for these guys. And that's a very good question, by the way. So, for example, that apartment complex, he would have to have 25% of his development area in planted canopy. And that's a bit much for this particular project, in my opinion. He doesn't have, when I looked at a couple of multifamily, when I looked at those back in 2020, and actually visited all of these properties, I did not find one area that didn't have I didn't find one that was basically barren of trees. They all basically, I'd say the average amount of trees that they had before clear cutting, which we don't like, was probably 75%. Titusville is very wooded. Now, that's not so true in all areas of the county, but I didn't find any that were lacking trees. Now, I know I've seen a couple properties that, maybe are right near the river or something that don't have, 25% or even, 35% preserved canopies, and we're slated for single-family subdivisions, or in that particular time frame, the multifamily. I just didn't find it. And so the only ones I'm finding right now are these ones that somebody cleared, the trees. And there may be some properties that don't have it, but we're talking about redevelopment. If they just don't have it, and they're, you know, able to support trees, that's a different matter. We're trying to solve the problem of kind of a blighted site. I mean, let's say somebody had, you know, 10% trees on there, and it was all natural area. Well, they would be required to, you know, whatever they couldn't have as preserved canopy areas, they would have to plant, let's say they wanted to plant like, let's say they had, they wanted to preserve 10%, which was, you know, preserved canopy. If they couldn't, for some, you know, reason, a good reason, save the 15% preserved canopies, okay, they wanted to just do 10%, they have to supply 15% planted canopy. We're not trying to give a break to somebody with a good piece of property. We're trying to get like the Christian Cove Court, not Christian Cove Court, Christian Court condo. I live on Clifton's Cove Court. Anyway, so what we're trying to give a break to is the projects like Christian Court. And that's where it dawned on me, a problem, we need to solve it. And then Kay had made that list, so I looked at De Leon apartments. This is something that would be great for the city. Let's see if we can just improve this apartment complex, do what we need to do, and have it nice. Give them a break. And then this was Woody Rice's apartment complex, sorry. Woody's apartment complex that everybody loved, you know, I don't know if he just, you know, if he could really pull it off. And everybody liked it. It's just that he had all this bare area where the whole apartment complex was going to go. So that's what I'm saying. Any other questions? Does that make sense? I hope so. All right, I'll get out of here. Thanks for listening.
Kay St. Ange?
Yeah, Casey Notch. I hope several of you will attend council's special meeting on July 22nd on the multifamily ordinance, CRZ ordinance, and native plant ordinance. You will have the opportunity to speak to council on these proposed ordinances, and I think Lou is going to tell you a little bit more about the timing of that. But each of these ordinances will have a big impact on our community's environment and the lagoon and wildlife. Only if adopted. We have to convince them to adopt it. So staff is going to give their presentation, but I think it's crucial for you to be there and make your point of why you're recommending it, and I will be speaking as well. Mary has a valid point. Okay, we have a lot of building sites in Titusville. We have a few, like the ones Mary presented to you, that have very few woods, trees at all. We want to save the ones that are heavily wooded. Let's build on them last. Let's build on these that have no trees. Let's build on them first. And they're inner city. The ones that are heavily wooded are more on the outskirts, right? We want to encourage developers to build on these that have already been cleared, like Woody's Park and Harrison. That would have been a prime site, but I think the ordinance actually was requiring too much of Woody to plant so many trees. I don't know the whole story behind it, but that's something to consider. So you very well may want to ask staff and ask for a motion on that tonight. But my main concern, I sent you all an email about these definitions. I don't think I have to read that email to you again unless you really want me to, but I thought I would just itemize what it is. The definitions provided you on condominium and townhomes, it's not giving you a definition of a condominium complex. It's giving you a definition of a building and the units on that building. Same with townhomes. It's giving you a definition of a unit, and it's not telling you what a townhome complex is or a condominium complex is. And so I really think that you need to, I'm going to list these in order. Number one, please ask staff to consider amending the proposed multifamily ordinance to say, beginning at section 3031B1, quote, residential subdivisions, including townhome condominiums and multifamily projects. And then it goes into parentheses, excluding properties 2 acres or less that satisfy the comp plan, are required to meet the minimum requirement of preserved total tree canopy areas and associated reduced tree mitigation requirements. As it is written now, it does not include condominiums. Well, why not? The definition, it says, of condominiums that they are individually owned. So that is basically a subdivision. So, but why don't we have it listed there unless they already think that falls under residential subdivisions, but I think it's important to list it, to actually use family ordinance. And then I think we need to amend the proposed multifamily ordinance to provide definitions of townhome developments and condominium developments to indicate that they are individually platted subdivisions. So the condominium here, it does say that it's individually owned, okay? So it gives you an idea that it's individually platted. But the townhomes, it says nothing about being individually platted, but I gave you individually platted that are considered subdivisions. So I do believe that's how it's being done, but we just need to have a definition so that when a developer is considering building a townhome, he knows that it's individually platted and it's a subdivision, and therefore it must meet the current tree canopy requirements. All right? Townhomes must meet the current canopy. So, but we need to have this in the multifamily ordinance as well. So, because we do not yet know if the multifamily ordinance will be approved, I think we need to suggest to staff, or you need to suggest to staff, that section 37.1, defining townhome developments and condominium developments as individually platted subdivisions, we need to change this wording here to not just define the building or the one unit, but have definitions about condominium complexes, townhome complexes, and say that they are individually platted subdivisions in case that multifamily ordinance doesn't get passed. The important thing is residential subdivisions, multifamily developments, and multifamily developments are subject to the tree canopy requirements of single-family subdivisions, as all Titusville residents deserve the benefits of living among tree canopy and all the benefits that it provides you. So I hope I provided you some clarity of what I'm asking that you do, but we need definitions. We need in the proposed ordinance, I do think you should have the words condominiums in there. I do think we need clear definitions in the multifamily ordinance. And just because we're not so sure that that will get approved, let's just amend section 37.1, the current 37.1, or ask staff to amend it. Ask staff to recommend to council to amend it. That's it. Any questions? I really think it is very, very important to require canopy requirements for multifamily. And I don't know that council's on board with it yet. I think we need to make our case. We need to let them know that without requiring the same thing in multifamily townhomes and condominiums, we are in fact discriminating against people who do not own a home. They are not receiving the same benefit as homeowners. And there could be a class action suit brought against the city. I do believe that's true, that it could happen because we're discriminating against renters. And many, many people now are having to be renters because of the price, not just in our town of single-family homes, but all throughout the nation. The cost of building materials and labor is so high that people cannot afford to buy, and they can't accumulate that much wealth to make the down payment. And also they're living in multifamily townhomes and condominiums, but they deserve to have trees among their buildings so that they can sit outside, under a shade tree or stand under a shade tree. It makes such a huge difference. I was at Blue Hole today talking to a couple people, and the sun beating down on us. That's why we're planting trees there. And we just had to find a tree to go stand under while we had this little chat, because we were sweltering. People who live in apartment complexes of all types deserve to have a tree to stand under or to sit under. They deserve to have the trees reduce the temperatures so that they don't have the AC as much. Maybe there's a tree over their car so that it doesn't get 145 degrees in it. They deserve the reduced flooding that we're seeing happening right now. Trees help reduce flooding. Yes, dangerous trees need to be removed from over the houses, over the cars. But healthy trees.
Okay?
Okay.
Please, I'm sorry.
Yes.
You went to great length
Okay.
to define a condominium. And a townhouse and a subdivision.
Yes.
Well, what about an apartment house? Where is that defined?
I think that's
mean,
you'd
you're-
have to ask her. I don't think that was included in here. This is just the definitions of
if you're
condominium,
trying
townhomes,
to
and
protect-
subdivisions. We could have asked for duplexes, triplexes, quads, definitions, but she's the one that came up with these definitions. I believe the city land development regulations have definitions for multifamily and single-family and tripods and quads and probably all those different things. But the thing is, for the tree ordinance to work well, we need to know what a townhome complex is. That it is individually platted and actually is a subdivision because of that. That's how these SSA and that's how it's being done, and I give you an example of that Royal Manor. So she's going to answer your question.
I understand, but if I go down Sisson Road, a lot of the new construction are apartments.
Yes.
That's not included here.
No, multifamily. It's a multifamily ordinance. Multifamily is
So
apartments.
is that where it's covered?
Is that
Apartments?
what?
Are apartments covered under multifamily?
Yes, that is the
By
main
definition.
criteria of
By definition,
multifamily is
It is
apartments.
defined what an apartment complex is.
I'm going to let Lily speak to that. When you say, when the land development regulations say multifamily, are they referring to apartments?
So what I pulled was specifically the definitions from the land development regulations as they exist currently. I think you're talking about, when you talk about multifamily, you get into residential zones, R1, R2, R3. It just talks about density, how many
It's a
people.
density issue, right?
Yes, but I don't know if that answers your question.
Okay.
That's what multifamily is about, density. And you can have density in various ways, condos, townhomes, things like that.
And apartments.
And apartments, yeah. But all of that is under multifamily.
But in the proposed ordinance, it is a multifamily ordinance. It says residential subdivisions, including townhomes and multifamily projects. When you're talking about the multifamily projects here, some of them, it says on the building, apartments, okay, are those multifamily projects. That's what he's asking you, I do
Yeah, I mean-
believe.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, apartments are multifamily.
There's your answer. Does it say that in the code somewhere?
I didn't pull, I can look through it, but I didn't pull that definition out.
Yeah, I know. She was only asked for these, but that was always my understanding, that multifamily included apartments.
But why would you make a different definition for a condominium, which is all it is an apartment building with the exception of ownership? Condominiums versus apartments, the difference is ownership. That's it. It is the same building with multiple apartments.
I don't
And
know,
you're making- and you're making-
condominiums
you're
also have homeowners association fees, condo
You
fees.
can have homeowners association in an apartment complex.
Oh,
You
okay,
can
I've
have it
never
all done.
lived in one that did, I'm sorry.
Again, I'm not, what I'm trying to look for is clarity.
Yes, and she's trying to find the clarity for you. I
That's-
can't look it up right now. So
You know, I'm trying to find clarity on definition.
Mhm.
Because you went to a lot of, thought on the condominium, but all that is an apartment complex with ownership. That's it.
Well,
That's the difference.
Okay, so a subdivision is a subdivision. This, our ordinance right now, only, the tree canopy ordinance only applies right now to residential subdivisions,
Okay,
okay? And so now the proposed ordinance says residential subdivisions, including townhomes and multifamily projects, are required to meet the minimum requirements of preserved and total tree canopy areas. So we were asking, well, how do you define a townhome? Then the question moved on to how is a condominium defined? Now you're asking, how do you define a multifamily? Okay, so currently it's just residential subdivisions. Townhomes, if townhomes indeed are subdivisions, they currently are included in residential subdivisions and currently are required to have the minimum tree canopy.
Okay.
They're required to do so. So the question is, how about condominiums? Well, it says here that condominiums are individually owned, and so they're, I believe they are individually platted, that the land that I believe they're subdivisions. No? Okay, well, that's what we need.
I don't think so.
Okay, so therefore, they need to,
The
residential, the condominium word needs to be put in here. Residential subdivisions, including townhomes and condominiums.
Condominiums have a footprint.
Right, so let's put
Of all
condominiums
inclusive.
in here. That's what I'm asking you to do.
Okay.
To put condominiums in here to these different residential types of dwellings meet the canopy requirements. So that's why, I think the word condominium should be included in this amendment, I'm thinking that it should be amended. It never, when Brad wrote this, including townhomes and multifamily project, he didn't put in condominiums, but I think it should be in there. Unless they are already considered residential subdivisions or already considered multifamily projects. But even so, for clarity, it'd be nice to have condominiums in there, that word, condominiums. And that's what you're asking for is clarity. So Lily's trying to look it up. Maybe she has the answer for you.
Again, it's the same issue with apartments. Unless apartments are defined within the multifamily.
Well, I think that's
Okay.
what she's about ready to tell you, that apartments are included in multifamily.
So I actually couldn't find apartments in the definition.
Okay, so we need apartments.
But I can say, to your point, yes, the condos are not platted individually as townhomes tend to be.
Exactly. Exactly.
And it is about ownership on the land to the sky.
Land, yeah.
So if you own the land,
You don't own the land.
yeah, but you can still, technically the owner could rent it out after then it could be an apartment. So then it gets really weird after that.
That's,
But I would-
again, it gets weird after,
Yeah.
yes, at the
So
beginning.
because
of
it's
the-
weird, let's put the word condominiums in here, you know, so it becomes less
I think
weird.
the easiest way will be just to, if townhouses are gonna be townhouses and subdivisions, because I can have condominiums within a subdivision.
Well,
I can have that.
how would you like to word it, Hector? That's what you need to say. Tell us, residential subdivisions including, What?
Multifamily housing, period. And then under multifamily housing, condominiums fall in, just like apartments.
okay,
Can I say something?
Go ahead.
There-
Yeah, because I'm confused.
Somewhere in the LDR, there's some descriptor of multifamily, and it talks about people living on top of each other. Okay, I can't cite the section in the code, but I've read it recently, and it differentiates between single-family and multifamily. And one of the ways that it differentiates is on top of each other, okay? And here in Titusville, this lady's shaking her head, and do you want to?
Yeah, please.
This is a fascinating discussion.
Ms. Gibbs,
I don't-
please tell
Yes.
us why you were shaking your head.
Okay, but I was very quiet. All right, so let me just add a couple of points for consideration. Keeping in mind that the context here, that I think tree canopy and landscape requirements differently between single building homes, okay, single family homes, which includes a single family home, and it actually also includes a duplex, because they're oftentimes built on a quarter-acre lot or a standard platted lot versus multi-unit. And I like the terminology of multi-unit instead of multi-family because it's more precision of language. So multi-unit housing can be an apartment. It can be a condominium. They have the same structure, they can have the same structure, but different ownership. A townhome is a multi-unit living, it is a multi-unit housing unit. But typically a townhome will have the living space in a two-story unit, so there's no one living above the unit, and that's why I was shaking my head. It's still multi-unit housing because there's a difference in landscape requirements in my mind because of the way that multi-unit housing is situated on a larger parcel of land. So I think that's all I wanted to say, but I just wanted to clarify some of those terms. Townhome is an apartment with shared walls, but typically built so that you have two levels.
One thing I've learned regarding the proposed plans on the Royal Oak Golf Course, there are villas and then there are single-family detached. There are no multifamily units on that 550-unit proposal, even though there are townhomes and other, I think, duplexes, villas, whatever they're calling, but none of that is considered multifamily in Titusville. That was the point I was trying to make. There is some reference in the LDR about related to multifamily and those types of construction where people are stacked in multi-floors on top of each other, which you do not find in fee simple townhomes or it's possible that condominiums can have, obviously, I've lived in one a couple of years ago, a 6-story building condominium unit. So there are those, which would be multifamily, but you can have condos and they're not multifamily. They're common wall perhaps, and they're all over the place, but that doesn't.
I think the real problem is, we're dealing with this wording here, residential subdivisions, including townhomes and multifamily projects are required to meet the minimum. Well, really, all we need to do is say all residential dwellings must meet the projects, or all residential projects must meet the canopy requirement. But this is what has been presented to council so far. And I think this is what will be presented to them on July 22nd. So we're trying to make this work, because this is what Brad came up with. But really, what we want is all residential projects, complexes, developments meet the canopy requirement. That would be ideal, so that all residents have the same benefits of living among. But now Mary's throwing it, if they don't have any trees on the land to speak of, then we might want to give them an exception. So I don't know how to make Brad's wording here pretty and inclusive, unless we have, say, residential subdivision, including townhomes, condominiums, multifamily projects, including apartments, we're just going to keep listing all the different kinds, duplexes, when what we want is all residential. So I see the problem, and I don't have a solution.
Okay, do you want this modification to be communicated to staff before the 22nd? Is that what you're trying to do?
Yes, right now. Communicate.
It seems minor to me, but to staff, is that what you're trying to do, is have staff make a minor modification to what they present to council on the 22nd?
Well, I don't think saying all residential should meet requirements is going to pass Brad Parrish, I don't think so, because this is what he's come up with, and I think we need to make some minor adjustments to it. Yes, so if you made minor adjustments, she could, from what I understand, she could probably pass that on to Brad, and they might add it in. But if you try to throw it all out and just say all, I don't know that they can make a minor, that's not going to be considered a minor adjustment. But I don't know how this amending it at this point works. Those are questions for Lily.
So on the 22nd, as I understand, this presentation meeting, they'll come up with, Brad will bring his suggestions. There'll be several of them. And with the intent of council want to move forward, that's also the time where I think you were asking about having to pick a speaker to come up and say what TEC would like to say on behalf of what's being presented. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that is correct. Because of the format of the presentation meetings, there are no speaker cards for the individual agenda items. The only time the public gets to speak is at petitions and requests at the end of the meeting. That's what I've been told. And so it doesn't make, it's not going to help us, for staff to make their presentation and council to talk about it, and then we have to wait until the end of the meeting to be able to make our comments. That's why I requested what I did last night. Developments is pretty simple, but I don't know. That might be what we want to recommend. I don't know.
I think,
but
sorry to
go
jump
ahead.
in, because the current canopy requirement, and that's being talked about, was intended to add multifamily, because it currently reads residential subdivisions shall meet tree canopy requirements, and the way that was being interpreted was for a single family. Started rolling again, that we're trying to add more specifics, so there aren't as, it's not just being interpreted as just single family residential.
Okay. Well, so then Kay's request, I mean, it sounds all complicated, but it seems pretty simple. Kay is requesting that we ask to add condominiums to the language. And Mary is asking that we ask staff to come up with some kind of a reasonable exception for redevelopment lots that don't have very many or any trees on them, so that the developer doesn't have to plant 25% trees on a bare lot. And I think those are both good recommendations. I don't know if that can be
So
included by the 22nd or whether we just wait and then that would be our comments on the 22nd.
Okay, so TEC wants canopy requirement exceptions for redevelopment or low canopy land, as well as adding condos to the multifamily canopy ordinance as it's defined. I got that part.
Excuse me, could you read that again? I'm not sure.
TEC wants canopy requirement exceptions for redevelopment land area, I put in parentheses, areas of low canopy, currently low canopy land. And then,
Only redevelopment. Only redevelopment.
right, so the developments that can't meet, that don't even have the trees.
Yeah, for redevelopment, something like this. Well, but. Okay. First of all, I think that this is going to be a high-level discussion by Brad. That's what they wanted. They're not going to get into the weeds like condominium. So, what I'm recommending that you recommend is that for redevelopment projects, that on land that has little or no canopy, existing canopy, that adjustment be made. We're not asking for an exception for an unbuilt pristine parcel with low canopy to have an exception. Only redevelopment. As an exception for redevelopment, if somebody's wiped out that canopy. And I think we need to keep in mind that what we want out of the council is the instruction to move ahead. We do not want this ordinance killed by a vote of forget this. So you can ask yourself whether it'd be wise to get into the weeds now about the definitions, or if it would be smarter to ask for clear definitions. And that's my thoughts. Does that make sense?
Okay, so if I think I understand what you're asking, the only lots that will be available will be redevelopment lots.
The only ones
For-
that are,
For
yeah,
some forgiveness,
yes.
okay. And who determines the forgiveness?
That's what we need staff to help work on. We're not gonna get into the
I'm
exact,
talking percentage.
Oh.
We're talking 25%. I can't meet it. I bought a piece of land, I cannot meet it.
you cannot make the 15% preserved, yeah.
Okay, I can't even meet 15%. There's
That's right.
nothing on that lot. US 1, across from Publix.
Okay,
I bought it, and therefore there are no trees.
right.
Okay, the guy already paid. The owner paid eventually, when he bought it to get all the trees out. But now I'm buying the land and it's got no trees. And I want to put a condominium there.
But has anybody developed that beforehand?
Yeah, they're putting lines in and all that now.
No, but I mean, has this been a building that they tore down and
There
it
was a
said,
building there, yes. There was a bar there, absolutely.
okay, there was a bar, it's
Yep.
no longer there, right?
Yep,
Okay, that has no trees, right?
right,
Okay,
Because they bulldozed them all.
okay.
exactly.
And they bulldozed them all when they built the bar, right?
No,
They just recently bulldoze them?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's for staff to make sure that if it has anything to do, that's a staff problem, because that's called gaming the system.
Yes, that's what I've been
And
talking.
you don't want them gaming the system. I'm talking about Christian Court, which was bulldozed back in 1996 or the 70, or Woody's apartment that, you know, they had something there and they bulldozed. I'm not talking about somebody who just decided that wouldn't it be nice if they got all this land cleared and cleared all the trees. No, they don't get any exception.
No, they don't, but I'm gonna go buy the property, and then I'm gonna put a condominium there. And I don't have any trees.
Because TEC is not responsible for that. What we want to do is get council. I could talk on and on. I'm going to sit down, but you got the point.
Well, the point is that it's very few exceptions.
That's right. There's very few. I found none in this, and when I went through all the single-family development.
There are very few exceptions,
Exactly.
if it's done correctly.
You can put a date that it was cleared. You can do something like that. But
I think that goes back to the part in the natural resources plan that states that we don't have an effective fine levied as a result of violating the trees, like after you buy it. I think, not to muddy the whole concept of what we're talking about, but.
Again, yes, that is for something like across from Publix on 50, you know. But if we're talking back in before Apollo program, okay, for whatever reason, then we're talking very few exceptions. Those lands are gone for the most part. So again, Mary, I'm trying to wrap my head around what you just brought. You do a lot of good work and you put a lot of research, but I'm trying in my mind to figure out what is it that we're trying to fix. Okay? I'm always honest with you guys. And that's just me.
If the definitions are too much in the weeds right now, maybe we should do that after this meeting on July 22nd. Maybe if it moves forward, then we can eventually add more clarity with definitions. Maybe that's a more appropriate time. But Megan Moscoso last night was talking and saying, in regards to something else, it needs more clarity of definitions, because if you don't know what you're talking about, then how can you make an ordinance? If you don't have definitions, you know, how can you really? But maybe it's too much in the weeds for now, because it's just being proposed right now. I leave it up to your wise decision-making and Lily's input. So, but I do think at some point, we need some definitions, and we need to make sure, what are we going to do with condos? What are we going to do with townhomes? How are we going to make sure all this is clear? So
I don't think it's unreasonable to request that condominiums be added to the list. I don't think that's that bad. Okay, and then I think that Mary's request is reasonable. You know, we want redevelopment. Those lots that she has pointed out here, Christian Court and no, not DeLeon. DeLeon is it was an apartment building that was built probably in the late 60s, early 70s. That is, it needs to be redeveloped. And then of course, that big sand lot at the corner of Park Avenue and Harrison it's been sitting there empty for decades. So I think it's reasonable to try to come up with a way, to help a developer develop those pieces of property.
And I'm all for that.
Okay?
I'm all for that. But those are the exceptions that I've been talking about. Those are ones and twosies or three or fours.
Yeah, there's not
Okay.
that many of them.
The thing
But-
is,
Somebody may want to buy an old shopping center and level the buildings on the old shopping center and build a
trees.
condominium there. You're not going to have any trees,
no trees.
but that's redevelopment.
Okay, so that's where we need to be. Lily, if I may, what's gonna happen on the 22nd? Is it a reading to council, or is it a presentation for approval?
It's just a presentation, and there's no action being voted on.
Let's move on.
Okay, there's a bunch of presentations on the 22nd. That's it. I don't know why you can't just make the comments that you've made tonight and then these emails that, there needs to be some more clarity. When you talk about all residential, including multifamily, well, that's all residential, condominiums, townhomes, single-family detached, it's everything. But there will be minimal amount of time at the 20s to add some input there. Mary, I'm still confused about your presentation, and I seem to be, I've heard this before from you about there needing to be some kind of consideration or exception for sites that do not have enough existing trees to be able to put 15% preserved tree canopy on site. If you have it, you need to try to do it. If it's reasonable to try to get the 15%, but if they don't exist on site, like Harrison and Park, we have an ordinance that covers that right now. You won't be preserving any trees. You're just going to have all new trees on a blank site like that. There are some other projects, I'm sure, and I don't know these as well as lifelong residents of Titusville because I've only been here 2 years, but I can easily imagine that there are existing buildings 50 years old that are being under new management, new ownership, I should say ownership, and the site in no way meets the standards of the current tree ordinance. So, and it may not be able to. So what considerations need to be given to a retrofitted project which brings it into compliance as much as possible? I don't know how to make a motion to deal with that tonight. I just don't understand enough about retrofitting the ordinance to deal with that. But I'm still a little bit confused about what you're trying to accomplish. But probably a lot of my confusion is because I don't understand whether these projects are existing or are we talking about something that was recently raised. And I mean, I don't know. I just couldn't get that from your presentation. So that makes me want to fall back and just say, we got a lot on our plate for the 22nd to understand and to try to get our presentations together before council. And I'm not happy with the presentations that staff is putting together on this, on these tree ordinances revisions. And it's going to take a lot of effort on our part to convince council that we need better than this. So I'd like an opportunity to sit down with you at some point in the near future and talk more about what you're trying to accomplish. Can we do that? More about what you're trying to do. I don't understand the exceptions you're talking about. And I don't know why I don't understand it. So I'd like to meet with you privately if that's possible. Maybe I'd understand it better.
I think what she's trying, very, very costly for a developer who's already doing a redevelopment, like in the case of the DeLeon Village, that guy's gonna spend a ton of money trying to clean that property up and make it livable again. To try to go from zero, like at Christian Court, there's no trees there. There's one oak tree that's in their stormwater pond. I mean, there is literally no trees on that property, that it would be very, very costly to start with nothing and create a 25% canopy on that property. And that might be enough to prevent a developer from redeveloping the property. Instead, he's gonna go out on the outskirts of town and mow down 75% of a fully wooded piece of property.
So you're saying on Christian Court, he's got a blank slate and he,
There's no trees there.
okay, so I'm a landscape architect and if you're charging me with, getting 25% canopy, I'm looking at this site plan, and I'm saying, okay, great, no problem. I don't see the problem. There's no street trees here, none. There's no trees in the middle of the circular area. I don't, I see this, most of the species are Ilex vomitoria. That's not a tree.
Oh, you're talking about.
I'm talking about Christian Court. I'm talking about Christian Court. I don't know, looks like a blank slate to me. Looks like a pretty easy.
It is a blank slate. There are no trees there. It is. You know where Ace Hardware is on Garden Street and McDonald's? And then there's like a street that goes in between McDonald's and Ace Hardware. At the end of that street is Christian Court.
Okay.
So somebody back in the 1990s cleared it without permission. I mean, they took every single tree off. It was appalling.
Water over the dam, right?
Right,
They should
right.
have fined them, and that's old news. Now we deal with the new owner. And you've got an existing infrastructure with roads, is that right? Or is
No.
it just a cleared lot?
It's a cleared lot. It's
Okay.
just a big sand pile. It's on top of one of the dunes. It's,
But this is the plan they want to implement?
yes.
And I don't see what the problem is, but, or why they need an exception for the tree ordinance, but, I mean, if they came in with a new plan that was different from this, why would it be any different than implementing this plan? It's like, well, Bob, if you want to be in compliance with the 2025 codes, we have a 25% requirement for trees on this property now. And to get that, you may have to lose a few units or something. I've run into this problem before. It's not that insurmountable. I just don't see the problem here just because it's an old plat and they're trying to resurrect it. And I don't know why they couldn't comply with the tree ordinance. Trees, if you don't have them, but I could place plenty of new trees on this. And it's easier if you do canopy shade, obviously, instead of Ilex vomitoria, to get the 25% canopy. That's my thoughts.
It has roads with gutters and everything, and it has fire hydrants. I assume they're connected to
What,
something.
oh, in Christian Court?
Yeah,
Oh,
Christian Court.
I've never gone out there. I've
Yeah,
just
no, I
seen
went
it from
there
Ace.
recently and drove around. It's a round circle and with a big open space in the middle with one oak tree, one large oak tree in the middle, but it doesn't look like he's saving that. But and then I don't know what the property boundaries are. It's treed around it, but I assume that it's pretty well cleared until you get to the next person's property, you know. But you can go out there, yeah, that's right. Or you can just zoom in on Google and see exactly what it is. Google Maps, you can see pretty clear. You can go under applications, under developments, under review, under the city's homepage, and has it right there. So, the developer is already, it's already got the roads and everything. That's gonna save the developer a lot of money, and the curbing and the fire hydrants. So.
Oh, I thought this was a blank. This site was, that's what I was asking. Are there existing roads there?
I'm telling you, I've been there, and you can see, using Google Maps, it does have a road clear around the circle. And it has the gutters, just the kind that we have nowadays, normal, smooth gutters. And it has fire hydrants every so often. And it has a stormwater pond, so it's not just a blank slate, because it has roads. Yeah, fire hydrants, has some infrastructure there that he won't have to pay for. So if he has to pay for 25% canopy,
I just
he's
don't,
already got the roads.
on this particular project, I just don't see an issue with
Okay.
not being able to comply with the 25%. I just don't see it. I've been there before on this multiple times, and this is, we've had recessions before, and we had to come back after the recession, and sites were already cleared, roads were built, and now somebody else wants to buy it and come in and be in compliance with the current codes. Codes may have changed from 30 years ago. Bob, if this is what you want to do, we understand. Here's our current codes. And then they make accommodations for that.
So Kay's right, there is roads there.
I just don't see why that would be an issue at all about bringing anything up to code now. Not to say that there couldn't be some situations where some exceptions for retrofitted projects where there's maybe more built than, I don't know. I could see some situations where you would need to get them into compliance as much as possible. That's a staff. You leave that up to staff, hopefully, and they can manage that without needing to get into the weeds. Not the same. Sometimes you just can't bring things into compliance.
Well, it'd be far better if they developed Christian court than if they went out and cut down 30, 40 acres of woods. You see, that's.
Ancient history, ancient
Yeah.
history.
Yeah. It's already been cut down.
If she's gonna keep talking, she should probably get on the microphone,
I'm sorry.
because we can't hear her in the back, it's not going out to TV at all.
Okay, thank you.
My bad.
Let's wrap this up.
Yes.
What's y'all's pleasure? You want to just let staff do their videos? If there's a lot of presentations on the 26th, then I don't know if they're going to give us any time. I don't know if we even know what staff is going to present. So how can we rebut it? Or I need direction here.
Lily, this is just going for a reading. Okay, so no action will be taken. But they will have to show a card. Staff is gonna have to show what they're bringing forward.
Right.
At that point, we would know.
Right.
And then we can take a reading of what's going on. Because if the meeting is for a reading, no action will be taken. Then wishes and all of that through the reading. But at the end of the day, this ordinance is going to continue. And then we have seen what staff is talking about. I don't know. It's just a thought to allow the process to take place.
Well, they weren't real happy last night with me asking for us to be able to do a presentation. I mean, you could tell they weren't thrilled about that. And so if we just wait until petitions and requests after they've had their discussion, then council will show their cards also. Maybe that's the answer, is just sit quietly and not try to attract any attention and see what comes out. And then we can comment on if we want to. But I don't want to make them mad, you know, don't want to,
There's no reason.
it's like poking a rattlesnake with a stick, you know? Don't want to do that.
If I can weigh in a little bit on the concern about what Brad may or may not say, it's about this, it's the same that was on council's agenda from the 27th. They just asked to kick it to the 22nd. So if you go back to the May agenda, May 27th, 2025, I believe it's under the native planting incentives. It's got a long coverage, multifamily residential development, and critical root zone of trees. It's all there, so.
So what do you guys want to do? I just watch the presentations and then we can individually, if we feel compelled to, we can comment under petitions and requests at the end of the meeting? Okay, sounds good to me.
We have staff's May 27th presentation. So they put it off until they wanted to hear it again on the 22nd?
Right, they put it off, it was gonna be on a regular city council meeting, and then it got pushed to a presentations meeting
Right.
on the 22nd.
So we can read what staff is going to represent.
Pretty much.
And be prepared to comment on that in our 3 minutes or whatever we get in our comments.
So can we go back and find the agenda, and we would be able to find the staff report for that? Because they didn't have a presentation prepared for the
They did.
27th, did they?
Yeah, it's on the agenda, and it will be on the next agenda, days before council, when it gets published online. But I can send you the council meeting link,
Okay,
if that helps.
that'd be good. So we can look at the presentation before the meeting?
They're the same that you guys saw months and months ago. But
Okay.
what's going to be on the 22nd was on the agenda on the 27th.
Sounds good to me. All right, moving on. On the agenda. All right, so we're back on to petitions and requests from the public. Anybody want to speak? No, okay. We're on to reports. Staff, do you have a report?
Only that I did attend the, along with you, environmental impact study from Starship. That was very interesting from how they had that presentation. I did get a contact from them, potentially, hopefully, to get someone to speak out to them to see if maybe we can provide a topic of concerns or things to have them come out and talk with us. So wanted to put that out there as an option.
Member Burdette, you have a report? Member Browning? Member Delgado?
The only thing I participated in the ISAC planting of the trees, and that was a great experience. The kids were great, and the whole atmosphere was fantastic. So I recommend it. It's a worth couple of hours. You get your hands dirty, and you get to interact with other people. So from that, thank you, Kay. That was great, and look forward to support you in the future.
Blue Hole, August 2nd.
Yes.
Member Cozy? Member Tucker? Member Thompson? No report. I'll give you guys a break. It was a long meeting, a lot of good discussion. But Lily was kind enough and Lori were kind enough to get these printed for us. I asked, and they did it, and they're gorgeous. So you can.
What they are, we don't know.
Yes, they are printed and bound copies of the Sustainability Action Plan and the Titusville Natural Resources Report. And they go along with the Thousand Friends of Florida report that I printed and handed out. And so these are your Bibles, guys. We have a plan finally. We don't need to be floundering around like a rudderless ship anymore. We can use these documents and move forward. We didn't, oh, okay, future agenda items. So what do we want to talk about in August? That's right, the draft of Resolution 30-2001. Yeah. That's one. We also are gonna get a report from Brad on the, oh dear. On the Parks and Open Space Ordinance. So that, Brad should be ready to, bring that to us. And, yes, we can get out of here before 9 o'clock.
Well, on a good note is, I'm planning on being out for the next meeting. So so hopefully you guys can leave a little earlier.
All right, with that, so we got, open space, Parks and Open Space Ordinance, and then we're going to finish for the Resolution 30-2001. Okay, anything else? Meeting's adjourned.